Hey, how's everyone doing today? It's Blake here from chesspathways.com, and we're continuing on today with our advanced opening training, and the title of this video is The Branches of the Tree. And to explore this topic, we're going to use a particular opening line as a case study, and it's going to be that line in the Najdorf Sicilian we looked at in the last opening training video. So I'll just run through it here real quick. E4, C5, knight F3, D6, D4, we get an open Sicilian. Black goes for the Najdorf variation, knight F6, knight C3, A6. We're looking at the English attack with 6F3. Black strikes with E5, knight B3, bishop E6, bishop E3. Black's just going to get all those pieces into the game. Knight to D7, both players castle here. G4, B5, G5, B4, knight E2, knight E8. Another pawn enters the fray here, F4, A5, F5, A4. We looked at this tactical shot, knight B to D4. E takes D4, knight takes D4, B3, threatening to make a queen here, so king to B1, B takes C2, knight takes C2, white's down a piece for now, but this bishop's trapped, so bishop B3, black at least opens the A file for it, A takes B3, A takes B3, knight A3, knight E5, and queen G2, threatening F6. And again, I covered this line more thoroughly in my last video. You don't have to watch that video to get the lesson from this video, but if you find yourself thinking that it's impossible or impractical to learn a line this deeply, then please pause this video, go click the link down in the description, and watch the previous video, because you would be incorrect, and I want the chance to prove that to you. Now, I got a lot of great questions after I made this video about how to memorize long opening lines, where people were saying, well, Blake, that's great if your opponent knows all these moves too, but 9 times out of 10 they're going to deviate, at least at my level, and then what do I do there? What's the point of memorizing this long 22-move line if no one's going to go into this with me? So I wanted to address this common concern, and I really have 2 things to say to it. And the first thing is, yes, of course we have to go back and look for Black's other possibilities at every juncture, and analyze those too. That's really what this video is going to be about. You can't just memorize one 22-move variation and then call yourself an expert on the Najdorf. It's just not that simple. But it certainly helps to have one line very thoroughly analyzed deep into the middle game, so you can get familiar with the ideas for both sides in this opening. That's really going to help you when you start looking at those branches and trying to understand the plans for both sides. So we'll get into that. But the second thing I have to say is that the memorization itself, it's almost not the main point. Memorization is important, but the reason you see so many players, even all the way up to the expert master level, who struggle to come up with good plans in the middle game consistently, it's not because they haven't memorized a particular 22-move line. It's because they've never really put in the time to thoroughly analyze the openings they play deep into the middle game. There are tons of chess players out there, the vast majority of chess players, who might learn their openings from just reading a quick book or watching a YouTube video or reading an article. And then they'll play their 12, 13 memorized moves, but then they'll say, now what? And then they wonder why their middle game results aren't where they want them to be. So if you're serious about building a master level opening repertoire, I would consider memorization to be the 3rd most important aspect. It's not even 1st or 2nd like most people would expect. And this is actually the subject of another video I've made about crafting a master level opening repertoire. And that video is private. I'm not releasing that to be publicly available. In the past, I've really only shared that training with some of my students who work with me one-on-one. But if you're interested in that and you're serious about developing a master level opening repertoire, just let me know. Either post down in the comments or you can click a link in the description to get in contact with me, and I will send you that video for free. Just let me know you want it. But okay, now that we've established this trunk of the tree, this main line, now we can start looking for branches to explore. And a lot of times the best way to do that is to work backwards. So let's go ahead and step back a move. And we said here that if black plays knight e5, we're going to play queen g2. But we can consider what happens if black does not play knight e5. Now, I personally would not consider this to be a major branching point, mostly because knight e5 is so overwhelmingly played here. I think in more than 90% of games, black plays knight e5. But it's still good to look into it so we can see how to exploit it if black does not play this move. One of the main purposes of knight e5 is to stop bishop c4. Bishop c4 would just be a really nice move from white. It really takes aim at the king and also goes after this possibly weak b3 pawn, so we'll have to keep that in mind. One of black's tries might be rook to a5, just because black might want to double here on the a file, possibly think about some sacrifices later on, possibly trying to get this d5 break-in without allowing our queen to take. That opens this bishop up, possibly also to target a3. But again, bishop c4 here turns out to be pretty strong. g6 might be an idea, f6 might be an idea, and the queen can't even come to b8 to help defend this b3 pawn because the rook would be loose. So white already has a pretty good position here. Also, after knight a3, if black tried rook a4, that's another possible try. Once again, bishop c4 is pretty strong. Now queen b8 could be tried here, just reinforcing the b3 pawn. But white's already able to get a pretty strong attack. We can start analyzing these attacking ideas white has in this line, and this is going to apply to the main line too. Even if black does play knight e5, a lot of these ideas apply. Here we're going to look at a sacrifice, pawn to f6, and white's getting a very strong attack after something like g takes f6, g takes f6, let's say knight to f6, bringing that knight off the back rank, but now bishop h6. And the bishops here are very strong, queen g2 is already a threat, and black's pieces here aren't active enough yet to really menace the white king. So okay, we've looked at some alternatives here to this move knight e5. We can go back another move here. Certainly there's no real alternative here to playing a takes b3. That move is essentially always played. So we can go back one move further, and this is one major branching point. We said that bishop b3 was the main line because black wants to open up the a file, but certainly bishop takes a2 is another way to give up this trapped bishop and try to get something for it, so we should examine this as well. And I've pulled a line to share with you from my personal analysis files here. So okay, of course we have to take that bishop. Now knight e5 is generally played, we already know why that move is good, and now the key move to know is knight to b4. This is just a good square for the knight. Not only is it eyeing the d5 square, possibly even the c6 square if this knight moves away, it's also going to help shut down the b file so black can't play some idea like queen b8 and queen b3 too quickly. And again, analyzing and preparing these ideas deeply is going to be invaluable for you for your middle game understanding, because you never know what black's going to do. Black's always going to have the possibility of playing some line you've never seen before, but a lot of these ideas are going to be the same. These ideas to help defend the king, the ideas of where the key outposts are, a lot of it's going to transfer if you learn some of the key lines. So black could play queen b8 here. This move makes sense. It's eyeing this knight, and if the knight moves away, this queen will get to come to b3. The move I have prepared here is queen to c3. And there's other possible moves here like just h4 right away and really just going for the kingside attack. But I like this move. It helps stabilize the b3 square here a little bit to free up our knight. And you might think we're in danger of just running into a tempo here on the c file, but it's really not so simple for black to gain that tempo, as we're going to see. Knight c7 is black's most logical move. This knight's really just in the way of everything. It really needs to activate itself, and it also looks over d5. But now rook c1, going after that knight. Rook c8. And now an idea rears its head that we see all the time in the Najdorf, and even other lines in the Sicilian, where white's light-squared bishop heads to the h3 square after black commits a rook to c8. So here white can play f6, a pawn sacrifice, trying to open up lines on the king side. And if black declines this sacrifice, as they probably should, bishop f8 could be played. White now gets to play bishop to h3. Black's only real move here is knight e6, anything else is clearly bad. And now white gets to take on c8 and go into this endgame. White gets to trade off the queens here. For example, after queen takes, then rook takes, rook takes. White can play rook d1 here, and it should be pretty clear that white is better here. White just has more active pieces, this pawn could be a target. This is nice for white. And if black doesn't go for this, black does have a line where they can sacrifice the exchange, but I did some analysis, checked some databases for games played in this line, and proved to myself that black's attack is insufficient. So after knight e6, if we take on c8, black does have the choice to sacrifice the exchange, and instead of trading queens, they can take on b4. And in fact, not only did they just lose the exchange, they're also giving us a rook if we want it. And I think it's safe for white to take this rook. We can take here on a8. Black's attack does look scary, but white can defend. Rook c2, check. King b1, knight b4. And we can't really reinforce this rook with rook h to c1, because then of course queen a2 is checkmate. But white has ways to refute this attack. One is just to take on e6, get some more pieces off the board, and just let black take this rook if they want it. Black really can't do anything to us here, and white's just up too much material. I just played around here a little bit and looked for more moves. Queen d3, just giving up this bishop. Bishop takes f7 with the idea of queen b7. And it's very clear here that black's attack is not going to work, and white is winning. So, okay, I think we've covered this branch here of bishop takes a2. Again, the main move was bishop b3. We can step back one move further here. So in this position, we said black often plays b takes c2, forcing this knight to retreat. So we don't have any knight c6 ideas. We could consider alternatives here, though. There really aren't many. White's threatening f takes e6, white's threatening knight c6, If black were to try something like b takes a2 instead, then simply king a1, and it's not really easy to see how black can deal with both of these threats. I think their best might be knight c5, just trying to take a little bit of the sting out of knight c6, but now we can simply take on e6. And after, for example, f takes c6, now we can play knight c6 anyways, eliminate the bishop, this pawn will be very weak. Queen d7, knight takes e7, followed by bishop g2 might be one line, just defending this pawn. And now this knight really has to babysit this pawn for now, and these pawns might be more of a liability than a strength. If black can't really open these lines to our king, then these pawns might just be picked up in an endgame. Also, white has the bishop pair, of course. So, okay, that's that alternative there. There's really not much else black can play here besides the normal b takes c2. So let's keep going back. After knight takes d4, we said that b3 was black's main move. And this is another case where there's really just not a good alternative. Bishop takes a2 could be considered, but then, of course, knight c6. And how does black really deal with this? I guess they have to play something like queen c7, but now knight takes e7, king h8. White could just take on b4 here, and white definitely has the upper hand. I did see one game in my database where black tried playing a3 instead of b3, so we can take a look at that. Black's just trying to open up the a file here. And this does stop knight to c6, because now a takes b2 would be very strong. If we take with the king, then rook takes a2 comes with check, and if we play king b1, then bishop takes a2 comes with check. So that would not be ideal, but I think white has really two good answers to this move. We could simply play f takes e6, or I think there's nothing wrong with just playing b3, keeping all the lines closed, and black really still has to deal with our double threat here to take on e6 and to play knight c6. Not to mention the fact that there's going to be some lines now where our queen will even get to take on b4 because this pawn's not so easy to defend. So I think we've definitely proven that b3 is the best move in this position. These branches, by the way, are going to solidify the main line even stronger in your mind. If you remember why these alternatives aren't as popular, then if you're thinking about the position during the game, you're not really sure what to play, all these ideas are going to help jog your memory and really work together with your own analysis that you're doing over the board during the game to help you find the best move. So, okay, let's step back another move. Here, really there's no alternative to playing e takes d4. If white's going to play this knight sacrifice, knight b to d4, to get a really strong knight on d4 and threaten knight c6, black definitely has to get at least a piece for this. It wouldn't make any sense to just decline this sacrifice. So e takes d4 should always be played there. There's no real need to look at alternatives. Let's go ahead and step back to the previous move. So in this position, white has just played f5, and this is a significant branching point. We looked at black meeting this with the counterattack, pawn to a4, and then we're going to play this knight sacrifice, knight b to d4, but black does have a major alternative here. Black could deal with the threats of the bishop by playing bishop takes b3 and trying to open some lines to the king this way. So we have to look at this. A takes b3 would be way too dangerous. It allows black to play a4 and definitely open up the a file. The queen could even join the party with queen a5. So white should play c takes b3 here. And before we delve into the analysis, let's think about what happened at a high level. Black did wreck the pawns around our king, but they also gave up that very powerful bishop for this b3 knight that was very restricted. And if black makes nothing happen here, try to think about what white's ideas might be. Pause the video if you'd like. Really give this a shot. But white is just going to try to attack on the king side. White has ideas like to play knight g3, followed by f6, bringing this knight into the f5 outpost, possibly putting a rook on g1, possibly playing even h4, h5, h6. That's a slower idea, but it might be effective. And if a rook comes to the c-file, then we know that bishop h3 might also be an idea. So black really needs to make something happen, and that means that a4 is almost always played. There's really no other way to make sense of black's play here. So a4, and then the line I recommend for white is to play b takes a4, rook takes a4, and simply king b1 to defend the a2 pawn. And this often leads to a forcing line. White's threatening to possibly just play b3, help strengthen a2 even more, possibly threaten to win the b4 pawn after the rook moves. And if black tries to play queen a8 with a double attack here, white has a nice move to double defend. White can play queen d5 and defend both threats. And if the queens come off the board, then white's just clearly better. All the black pieces are so restricted here, and the d6 and b4 pawns could be targets in an endgame. So instead of going for this, black usually plays a very forcing sequence here after king b1. Black can play rook takes a2, with the idea being that after king takes a2, queen a8 is going to win the rook back for black. We have to play king b1, and now comes queen takes e4 and queen takes h1. King b3 has even been tried, but I don't fully trust it. So, okay, king b1, queen takes e4 check, queen to d3, queen takes h1, and now white gets to play f6. And even though white's currently down 2 pawns, I would be happy to play this with white. Bishop h3 is a threat with a double attack against the queen and the knight. Black's bishop's under attack, the black pieces are still really restricted here, and white scores pretty well from this position from what I've been able to find. So alright, coming back here after 15 f5, we've covered bishop takes b3, and of course a4 is the main line. Let's step back again. So here, after white has just played f4, we know that a5 is the main move. And it's funny, because I remember analyzing this position and this whole line in the Skittles room of a tournament hall many, many years ago. And there was a gentleman, I think he was rated around 1900, and he was insistent here that f4 should be met by e takes f4 instead of a5. He was saying, this is always how it works in the Sicilian. If white tries to break with f4, then you just take on f4, and then you have a great outpost here for the knight on e5. Why is anyone playing a5? So it's definitely an idea we should at least consider. So, okay, e takes f4, bishop takes f4. I think the main problem here for black, though, is that we have a lot of pressure on d6 now, and now this knight has access to the d4 square again, whereas this knight was pretty restricted before. Now, for example, if black tries a5, a4, we might get to play knight d4 without even sacrificing a piece. Usually white has to sack the piece to play knight b to d4, just like we saw in the main line. So I found one line here from a game, and I think it's pretty convincing because I have a hard time imagining how black can improve upon it. But if black plays knight e5 here, then I like just playing h4, going ahead with that kingside attack, making sure to stabilize this g5 pawn. And now what does black really do? I mean, they can try to play on the queen side. That seems to be their most straightforward plan. It's hard to see what else they can really do here. So a5, we can just play the calm king to b1. Now queen b6 has been tried here. Black could play a4, but I think we would just play knight b to d4 anyways. But okay, if they play queen b6, we can play knight b to d4. And if black starts trying to reactivate their pieces here that got pushed around by our pawns, let's say they play knight c7, I think white's just ready to play knight g3, and it looks like white's getting a very good attack here on the king side. Knight f5 could be an idea, h5 and g6 at the right moment might be an idea, and white looks to have the more pleasant game. So coming back here, after f4, again a5 is the main move. We looked at this alternative with e takes f4. We can step back another move here. After white has played knight e2, that's because black has just played b4, we retreat that knight to e2, and we said knight e8 was the main move here. Black does have a major alternative here. This knight could also come to h5, that's another safe square. And at the time of me making this video, I actually just had this line in a blitz game just a couple days ago, so I'm happy to be covering it now. Let's think about the ideas here. White doesn't really want to play f4 now because that would let this knight get exchanged. That's not really ideal when white has just spent a couple moves kicking that knight around. So the main move here is knight g3, and now if black tries to exchange knights, white gets to open the h-file. And that would of course be extremely dangerous here for black, especially because h6 can't really even be played without opening a bunch of lines. So my blitz game continued with knight to f4, and now it looks like this knight's free, but don't be fooled, right? You wouldn't want to blunder like this and try to win a pawn and end up losing the game. That's not a good idea. So instead of that, after knight f4, I just played h4, reinforcing this g5 pawn since my bishop just got cut off from it. And now after a5, I just played the calm king to b1. And now if black plays a4, we don't have to play knight c1, we have this move knight to d4. Just like in the main line, when black plays a4, we met it with this knight d4 knight sacrifice. Once again, this idea pops up. That's what I mean when I say these ideas transfer between lines. This time, of course, it's because this knight on f4 is loose. And here, after e takes d4, bishop takes f4, it's pretty clear that white has a good position here. b3 is the most logical try to open up lines, but there's no need to capture that pawn, as there usually isn't. White can just play knight f5, threatening either knight takes d4, or possibly eliminating this bishop. If black takes on a2, our king can just hide, and white has a nice position. Alright, so coming back here, when white plays knight e2, we looked at knight e8, the main line, and knight h5, the sideline, so let's go back. In this position, instead of playing b5, black does have a couple other possibilities. Really, b5 is such a logical move that you're usually going to see it. But there are other possible moves. Queen c7 is one, but now we just get to kick this knight away. g5, the knight will usually come to h5 in this line. It kind of makes more sense there than clogging up the back rank, especially because we're not ready to play knight g3 right away and threaten to open the h-file. But now black didn't get to meet g5 with b4 like they do in the main line because they didn't play b5, and that means that they're not going to get to kick our knight away, and that means that knight d5 might be an idea. The one line here that's very interesting is just king b1, playing a little bit more slowly. This knight on h5 makes it hard to just kind of ram through and mate black, but the black pieces do seem pretty restricted, and now, for example, if black plays b5, now knight d5 could just be played right away. And I do want to show you a very nice positional idea here. If black takes this knight, which they really have to, then after e takes d5, white has a very strong positional idea to try to play knight a5 and knight c6, taking up this very strong c6 outpost. A lot of people, when they think of the English attack, they think of pure, races to the king on opposite sides, and that can happen, but this is a very common positional idea that pops up in the English attack, and you get a greater appreciation for all these ideas in the openings you play when you do this kind of analysis. So, okay, we've looked at b5 here, the main move, and this alternative with queen c7. There are other minor lines you'd want to look into. I think rook c8's been tried, even a5's been tried, knight b6 has been tried, although that blocks in the b-pawn. But really, going all the way back here to the position after both players castle, black has all their minor pieces developed, and white plays this move g4, we've really looked at pretty much all the reasonable tries black can throw at us. We've only been looking at these branches for about 20 minutes now, and I'm guessing there's a lot of viewers out there who knew nothing about the Najdorf English attack going into this video, and now you're probably feeling like you have a pretty good handle on it. Of course, as we go back further and further towards these first 10 moves, black's going to have more branches available to them because the characteristics of the position haven't been as defined yet. For example, going all the way back here to move 6, where white's just played f3 and announced that they want to play the English attack, we've so far only been looking at this move e5, striking at the center right away. Black has a very major alternative here with e6, playing a completely different pawn structure, and you would have to do the same kind of work there. Establish a long main line, establish your trunk, and then work backwards and look for branches. So your work's not done by any means after you finish analyzing the e5 possibility. There's still other kind of realms to consider within the Najdorf English attack, but you can see how we're starting to put the pieces to the puzzle. And this, of course, doesn't just work with the Najdorf, this works for pretty much any opening. So I hope this video helped. Let me know in the comments what you think. And again, if you want that exclusive video about developing a master level opening repertoire, just let me know and I can send that over to you. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you soon.